My name is José Moya. I'm the director of the Institute of Latin American Studies here at Columbia University. And I just wanted to welcome you and to thank you for coming. Also, I wanted to thank Ernesto Rangel, sitting to my extreme left, and that's not an indication of his political position. Ernesto is a music producer and a great supporter of the Greater Caribbean Studies Center that is the sponsor of today's event. To thank Marisa Colon, the executive director of ILAS, the Institute of Latin American Studies, the spirit and the force behind it too. And of course to thank Rubén Blades, a man for all seasons really, a man with numerous and varied talents. He received a BA in political science and law in the University of Panama, but also a master's of international law at Harvard University. A singer and songwriter who recorded scores of albums. I lost track. It's a long list. Probably you don't even know the exact number. Many of them actually quite successful. He won 8 Grammys.
14.
Hey, I was going to make them into this.
No, you know what?
It was going to be 14.
It's funny. It's funny because one thing I told him is that I had to clear that up because if I don't clear, it sounds so presumptuous. It sounds very presumptuous. I hate to do that, but if I don't do it, then I get calls.
No, but let me see. It was going to add to 14 because it's 8 Grammys and then 4 Latino Grammys. So that's 12. 14.
It's like
okay.
It's like 8, 6. I don't know.
No, it's still short.
No, but I had to clear it up because I cannot tell you how much I get calls immediately. How many you said? No, I didn't say anything.
Yes, sir. Okay, there you are.
So I'm very sorry.
No, he's not being presumptuous. He's being
It
correct.
is presumptuous.
And
It is
accurate,
presumptuous.
Accurate.
Yeah, but it sounds presumptuous.
But it is not. Okay. Also, someone who truly raised the musical and intellectual level of salsa music, and you're modest, but it has to be said. Also, an actor whose filmography is as abundant as his discography. I don't know, many movies, including independent movies, but also Hollywood movies. They were nominated for Emmys also,
I have to do one plug. I'm right now working on a TV series called Fear the Walking Dead.
Oh, yeah.
I have to. Out of respect for everybody involved, and it's a good show, so I had to.
Anyone under 60 actually knows that show very intimately. But he's also, has been a political activist. He was a minister of tourism in the 2004, 2009. Ran for president of Panama, got, or 1/5 of the vote. So it's truly a Renaissance man, if the term has any meaning.
Crazy person.
And what is interesting is that he's an icon in Latin America and in Latino America. That is, the Latino community in the United States. That's actually very rare. I was trying to think who has reached that level. Maybe Celia Cruz, but it's very rare. So the first question that I had in this conversation was about this capacity to be Latin American and Latino.
It's a very...
Your origins too. I was going to say Rubén Blades. Mm-hmm.
No, but it's a very good, it's a great way to start. First of all, my last name is Blades because my grandfather was born in the West Indies, and his name was Rubén Blades. We have many people in Panama whose last names are
Anglophone,
or English. From people imagine the United States. We also have people from England. Rod Carew, Mauricio Smith,
Yeah.
Roberto Kelly, Eduardo Blades.
Yeah, but most of those people were the descendants of Afro-Caribbeans.
Well, everybody is black
came.
in Central America, in the Caribbean, please. You know, I have, when I perform, I always, I always said everybody has a black person inside of them. Here in this room, I don't care how white you think you are. We call them suspicious whites.
Okay.
They come from the Caribbean, and I laugh. I mean, and it's also ridiculous to start arguing how much black or indigenous or Chinese you have. That's so stupid.
No,
so
my question
pointless.
was this ancestor part of those West Indians who came to work in the Panama
ideally,
Canal?
ideally, I thought my grandfather was, in my mind, my romantic notion of my grandfather was that he came from Barbados, and because he talked like this, And I thought he came from Barbados, and he was a black man working in the canal. And then my father and my grandfather had a problem, and they didn't speak to each other for a long time. So I only got to see him once. He came to the house and stayed with us for 2 weeks. And he was pretty white, I have to say. I was kind of disappointed. His eyes were, that doesn't mean he was white. But he was an accountant. So, my whole notion of the guy with the accent.
Building the Panama Canal.
But he was a very nice man. But it's Blades. So when I noticed, in Panama, that was never an issue. And when I was in school, everybody called me Rubén Blades. Hey, Blade. As a matter of fact, in school, nobody called me by my first name. Now that I think about it. Hey, Blade. We call each other by the last names. Hey, Blade. So when I became more known, then it became an issue. Because then some people thought that I was trying to become a North American by saying Blades, when it really was Blades. Because coming from Panama, it has to be Blades. But then, in Panama, and I'm one of the people who does this, if you, for instance, Big Vaporub.
Yeah. That's true throughout the Caribbean, actually.
You don't say Vicks Vapor Rub. So if I go to a store and Big Vaporub, they look at me like, what? That's Vicks Vapor Rub. Otro, Tide, the soap. Tide, Tide. You don't go to a supermarket in Panama. ¿Me podría dar Tide, por favor? Tide. Tide. Sí, está aquí. So, Blades. It wasn't a problem for me. I don't care about that. What I do care is when people try to make me say something that is not correct. And so I make lo aclaro solamente. I just make it clear. But personally, Blades or Blades, not going to make a difference. What I do insist in is Ruben.
Okay.
With the accent and the E, not like the sandwich.
Okay.
Ruben. No, Ruben. With the...
But also, you're a first-generation Panamanian, so to speak, right? You're of Cuban and
My
Colombian.
family came from all over the place. My grandfather was born in Louisiana, on my mother's side. My grandmother, on my mother's side, was born in Galicia, Orense. On my father's side, my grandfather was born in St. Lucia, and then my mother was, my grandmother, my father's mother, was born in, she was Colombian, born in the Departamento de Panama in Colombia, when Panama joined Colombia, a very bad mistake, but we did it at the time. We were all so enthusiastic about Bolivar and what he was proposing. And so my family comes from all over the place. And if you go to the great-grandfathers, great-grandparents, it's even more complex. Because my grandfather, he married several times. And he had a lot of children. With my grandmother, he had 11. And before that, he had like 12 with somebody else. It was like, no TV. It was interesting. But my family comes from all over the place.
This was quite a... And then you ended up, the first time that you came to the U.S. was to Miami, 74, or what?
No, first time I traveled to the United States, I actually, you know what? You're right. I forgot about that. My mother was kind of concerned about me because of what was going on at the time politically.
Torrijos.
No, even before that. Torrijos comes in 68.
68,
The military coup is in 68. But before that, there was stuff happening. Cerro Tute in Panama was in 1964, 63. Where the riots, Cerro Tute was 62. The riots against the Sonians and the Canal Zone was in 64. So, there was this opportunity to go to it was some kind of vacation or something. I come from a family where we saved everything. To this day, I still do that. We didn't have like the capacity for like luxuries. Never knew I was poor because we never thought of us as poor. Everybody around us was the same, and we didn't need things. We didn't want things we didn't need. In those days, you dealt with what you had, and if you want to buy something, you saved, and then you bought it, and and that's the way it was. So, but the idea of a vacation, my mother died without a vacation. So the idea of vacations in our neighborhood was like, so-and-so went on a holiday. Really? Where? Did he die? But she wanted to get me out, so she sent me to Miami in some strange package of one of those trips. Weird. I was sharing the room with like 9 people, and it was horrible. And
This is when?
This is like 1966 or something like that.
Oh, that's really early.
66, 67, something like that. But I only stayed there for like 10 days or whatever it is, then came back. And then I went back in 69 because when the military coup occurred, they closed the university for a whole year. And it's, again, I'm so sorry about time because there's so many things. I can tell you something that sounds very simple. The guy came in 69, but if I don't explain how that happened, then it makes no sense. I ended up coming because not just my mother would rather risk that I would not continue studying law. I was already in law school, but the military closed the university, and the first faculty they closed was the law faculty. So now my mother says, well, this guy is idle now. God knows what he's going to come up with or do. So why don't you go to New York, Rubencito? You like music. And I look at her like, really? And you're not afraid that I can stay? No, but now the university is closed. So in those days I had a brother. My brother worked in Pan American Airlines, which no longer exists. And if you had relatives that work in Pan American, you can travel very cheaply. Yeah. So the plane ticket was like $20. So Miguelito Valdez, who was a wonderful singer, Miguelito Valdez gave me a name because he was a friend with my mother. My mother was a singer, better singer I'll ever be. And to play piano, she knew Miguelito. So Miguelito gave me a letter, so I went to the Paramount Hotel, 46th Street on Broadway, to give it to a guy who was the manager of the thing, was a Hindu person, which I came over with that thing, and that's how I ended up getting a nice hotel. I mean, it was scandalous, $20 a night. I couldn't believe it. It was so expensive. It was crazy. And an idea of doing an album with Pancho Cristal. Pancho Cristal was one of the most important producers of the time. He produced with Teddy Rigg a lot of the Joe Q albums. He produced a lot of the Richie Ray records. Actually, there's a song called Pancho Cristal me llama, Pancho Cristal me llama. Richie and Bobby sang it. So how did I end up meeting this man? When I was in law school, the first year, I was still working with a group there called Los Salvajes del Ritmo. So, yeah. So the Rhythm Savages. Yeah, hated that. But what are you gonna do? I hated that and the uniform. So one day I'm playing, and one of my teachers was in there, Narciso Garay. He was in this house, in this party. It was a weekend. He saw me, and he stood in front of me the whole night. If he wanted to drink, somebody would get him the drink, and he would take it, and he would just stare at me, and I knew I was in trouble. Monday, I got to the law school faculty, and I got a call from somebody comes, a friend of mine from the class, who says, the dean wants to talk to you. And I thought, the dean doesn't even know I exist. He said, they are looking for you right now. And I said, well, I had to climb stairs. So I said, you're coming with me. So we both climbed the stairs and said, this is a joke. And it wasn't a joke. And he sat me in the room, in his office. I was a chair, and he was on the other side. And he looked at me, and he looked at me, and he said, are you going to be a lawyer or a musician? And I said, I'm going to be a lawyer. And he looked at me, and he said, are you going to be a lawyer or a musician? I'm going to be a lawyer. He says, well, you cannot be singing with bands on the weekends or any time because that makes the faculty look bad. It looks like we are not serious enough, and you should be studying or preparing yourself, not doing this. I said, this is why I can get some of the money. The university was free at the time, but the books were very expensive. And I said, you cannot be a musician and continue to come here. So I quit. I quit music, right there and then. So a friend of mine calls me. We're still in the story of Pancho Grital. A friend of mine calls me and says that he's going to record in Panama. We didn't have a record studio in Panama. Discos Ismeños was the first recording studio ever in Panama. And they had put all the microphones and all the things, and nobody knew if they worked or not. So you had to record to find out if everything was kosher. So they called Bush. He had a band called Bush y los Magníficos. Better than Salvaje.
Better brand.
But it's still, like Los Magníficos. So. Okay. So he called me, and I said, I really don't want to, I can't sing in the thing because I'll get in trouble if I sing. So I can do backup vocals, but you cannot announce me or mention my name or anything. So he said, fine. So I went, and I asked, the singer was Anel Chombo Castro. And I went to Anel and I said, Anel, is it okay if I go and sing? Because I didn't want to take his moment. It was a big deal to sing with a band and to be recorded. That never happened in Panama. And Anel said, no, Ruben, thank you for asking me, but no, come. And so I went with the understanding I'm not singing. Pancho Cristal came from New York to the studio to check the studio as a sort of consultant or something. And again, in everything we do, at success, nobody arrives to success alone. No one. No one ever is successful alone. And luck has a lot to do with opportunities. Opportunities don't just happen because they have to happen. No, it just, I don't know why these things happen, and they don't happen to everyone. Bush had two guys. He had a trumpet player, three guys. He had a trumpet player, a sax, Chacho Medina, who played sax and baritone, and a trombone. Well, the trombone guy got lost, so he didn't show up. So now they can't play the charts. So now they have to do Guataca. C7s, the pump it, see what you're going to come up with, the carga. Chombo wasn't that good on that. So Chombo's doing whatever he's doing, and then Bush says to me, Rubencito, cántate una, aunque sea. I said, you're going to get me in trouble. He said, no, but who's going to hear it? This is just for us here. I said, too late. But you cannot use my name. Please, no pictures, nothing. Okay. Pictures, who cared? But I'm very paranoid. And I don't know his songs. So Benito Guardia, who was a piano player, he said, cántate el ratón. Because I used to imitate Cheo Feliciano completely. Cheo is to this day my idol of all time. And Ismael Rivera, pero Cheo, you know. And I knew El Ratón. And everybody knew the song. So Benito, and it was simple. It was just piano and timbales. So I sang the song. I began to sing the song. And Pancho Cristal was on the booth. So he listens to me, and he can't believe it, because I sound just like Cheo. When Cheo was at the best time of his life, I sounded just like, mi gato se está quejando. Y el tipo hizo así. He said, what? And then he went over to me and said, who are you? And then he said, if you ever go to New York, please call me. We can do an album. So when my mother talks about, why don't you go to New York? Mm-hmm. We don't have money, really. And I know this, and I call Pancho Cristal. In those days, you had to go to a place to get a phone call and call and give money. It was complicated. It wasn't like now. So it was a trip. So I contacted him. He said, yeah, come. So I came to New York in 1969. I arrived to New York for the first time. I only see New York in movies. I arrived to Times Square, and the first thing I see in New York after I got off the bus was a full-fledged riot between Vietnam protesters and the police in the middle of...
This is in Times Square.
Times Square.
Oh, and porno theaters in the backdrop, right?
Oh, please, every single thing. That's like, it was interesting. And then I managed to get to the hotel. I stayed there. Pancho was nowhere to be found. I sweated a lot, because at one point, they locked my thing, and because I wasn't paying, they locked my clothes in the hotel room, and it was not easy. But then he showed up, thank God, and I did an album in 3 weeks with arrangements by Lino Frias from La Sonora Matancera.
Oh, wow.
And Frank Rosas, trombone, and the band of Pete Rodriguez, who was at the time very well known for the Boogaloo. I Like It Like That, and Micaela and all that. So we did the record, and then I went back. I finished, and the last part of the story, because this is the good thing about these kind of things, because you force me to think about stuff. I wanted to see Cheo Feliciano and Joe Cuba. That was my dream, to see them perform live and to see Cheo, meet him. Cheo at the time was going through some situations, and he was in Puerto Rico, taking care of that. So every day I buy the paper and I look. I try to find who's playing. Nothing. I asked Pete Rodriguez, do you know? No, they don't play sometimes. The last day, I bought El Diario and look at the back, where all the places, and I see Joe Cuba, Havana, San Juan. I went like, Havana, San Juan, where is that? And I found out where it was. I took the train, got lost, because Panama, Broadway, you take any train, it's Broadway. No, this one dropped me in Lenox Avenue. So, no idea where I was. I had to walk all the way down trying to find Broadway, found it. Got there at 8:30 at night. They were cleaning the floors, but I didn't care because I wanted to be as early as possible. They let me in. They saw me and said, okay, go in. I sat down, and I just waited for Joe Cuba to come and play. The first guy from the band that went in was Jimmy Sabater. Elegant as he was always, Jimmy. Erect and elegant. Jimmy Sabater walked in, and I went to him and I said, Mr. Sabater, perdone que lo moleste, pero yo soy de Panamá y soy un gran fan de ustedes y de Cheo, y mire que... Como, like it happens to me sometimes. That's why I try to be patient with everybody, because I was like that too. And he just listened to me and he said, ¿Qué tú te estás tomando? What are you drinking? And I said, nothing. Just sit with me. Me sentó en su mesa. He sat me on his table. And then I tried not to talk too much because I was so excited, but to not piss him off, So I'm like listening, and then right before they went to play, I thought I had to ask. I said, Señor Sabater, mire, yo soy músico, which is, at that time, of course you expect that, I'm a musician too. So you don't want to hear that. I also sing. So he said, sí, okay, bien, oh, that's good. In my dream, it's always been to sing with Joe Cuban. And he said, mira, a Joe no le gustan estas cosas. Joe doesn't like these kind of things, So I said, pero okay, I understand. And I was prepared, but I said, could you ask him? He said, well, vamos a ver qué se hace. Yo, bueno, thank you so much. Okay. So they had like 5 bands, okay, or 3 bands. In those days, you played like so many bands played. Coca y sus Exploradores. They had all kinds of music, weird combinations. So I had to wait, till they went once, played, play 40, 30 minutes, boom, the next band, then they come back, and back. So I'm looking at the clock, because my plane, I gotta leave tomorrow.
Oh.
I'm leaving tomorrow, but I'm gonna stay no matter what, but I hope it's not that late, because I'm looking at it. And all of a sudden, bueno, este es el último set de Joe Cuban, the last set, And I went and I said, should I ask him again? Because it's almost, this is it. So,
Last chance.
Last chance. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. It's good. It's good. I'm listening to the band. I heard him. I can sing from over here for myself. And leave the man alone. He's been gracious enough now. I'm not going to bother him anymore. So I'm just sitting, and I'm looking at Jimmy. In that moment, I saw Jimmy Sabater. God bless him, because him and Joe are both in the other neighborhood. Se fueron para el otro barrio. And I saw Jimmy. Jimmy's in the center, and Joe is playing to his right. He turned to Joe and said something. And where I was, I thought he just asked him. Joe, why don't you give this kid a chance? It's 4 o'clock. Everybody's gone. So, and I don't know if he asked that, but I think he did, because then Joe went like. So I said, nope. I think he said, nope. So then Jimmy did something for which I got to meet him later when I was professionally playing. I went to his house, ate in his table. God bless him. I love him dearly. And Jimmy did something that I forever will be grateful for. He called me. Anyway, I think he pulled rank in there, because he was important, Jimmy Sabater. So then, Panama! He didn't remember my name or anything. Oye, Panama! And I went like,
talking to me?
Must be me. And if it's not me, it will be. And before...
Rod Carew is not around, so...
Roberto Duran. Before he put the stick down, man, I was next to him. And he said, ¿Qué tú quieres cantar? And then I said, I know the repertoire. I know everything you've ever played, every song Cheo has ever sang. I know every single thing, whatever you have. And the older, the better. But we're talking about, this is 69, so older is like 62. So he went, ¿Tú te sabes Guarachi Bembe? Digo, first song I ever sang was that one. Guarachi Bembe, but I look at Joe Cuba. Joe Cuba didn't even look at me. He was like. So I said, and Jimmy, nothing. Jimmy, they're both very professional. No bad looks, nothing, no scenes, but I know, he didn't quite like that. So the thing starts, bam, 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 bing, bam, 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 ba-da. The same chart. Y arranco. Ya que la gente tiene ganas de gozar. And Jimmy screamed at the top of his lungs. Started to laugh. The people that were in the place got up and ran to the stage because they thought it was Cheo. They thought Cheo was back. And I sang the whole song. And Joe Cuba was playing and just watching me and smiling, you know. And Jimmy ran out of cheek, you know. And when it was over, I said, thank you so much. He said, quédate aquí. I said, no, I really didn't want to push my luck. You know, it's like, no, I joke you. I said, no, quédate. Where are you from? You going back? What are you going to do? I said, yeah, I'm leaving. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry. And la cosa fue que I sang the 3 or 4 songs, and the next day, I returned to Panama, and I went back to law school and didn't sing again. I was working with people in jail in Panama because I was involved with the criminology department. So I worked with people in jail from 1972 through 74 because my law degree, my thesis was on recidivism, repeat offenses, yeah. So, and I went to Coiba. We had a penal island at the time, Coiba Island, which is one of the few remaining penal colonies in the world. I was there for several times, and the last time when I was doing my thesis, I stayed there for a while.
Now, Torrijos was in
no, the dictatorship was in position at the time.
Now, Torrijos was a controversial guy because he was, military and a coup d'etat, but he installed a lot of reforms, social reforms.
It's an interesting scenario for me because for me, and it's a discussion that persists to this day, you know. Some people will find something good to say always about someone. My position is a dictatorship is a dictatorship. I don't care if it's in Cuba, Chile. Because some people, if you talk about dictatorships, they say, no, but look at, they're giving this to people. But my feeling is that you should not be surrendering your life in exchange for social the type of social help that should be coming forward without that compromise. That's my position. So, and that creates a lot of problems and has created a lot of problems for me from both the left and the right. Because I'm not the only one that has gone through that. I remember Albert Camus, his positions when the Algerian conflict created for Camus a tremendous problem because he was attacked by both sides because he did not define himself with one of the two groups. And it can be very difficult.
And he was Algerian born, so on top of that, Camus had been born in Algeria.
Well, the thing is, like I was telling Rangel, my first album that I did that time, there was a song called Juan González. See, very early on, I decided that I was going to write about social issues. And I was very influenced by a group from Brazil at the time, 1962, a group called Jongo Trio. Jongo Trio is Jongo, Jongo. It was a group that was so special, and those of you, I'm sure the majority of you have never heard of this group, listen to it because it's one of the few examples I've ever found of jazz being sung at the same time in 3-part harmony. I mean, these guys were drums, bass, and piano. The charts that Jongo Trio were singing, what they were doing in 1962, you play it today, and it sounds as if it's just been made today. And the songs that they were doing some of them had social content. Menino da Laranja is a song about a little kid that goes out to sell oranges to help ends meet. O Filho de Mãe Solteira the son, the child of a
Unwed mother.
unwed mother, you know, cuya ignorancia tiene que sustentar, whose ignorance he has now to confront. And there was another one called Terras de Ninguém, no one's land, that had to do with terratenientes, you know, latifundistas, o dueño não deixa passar. And all these things I was reading and listening, and I thought, this is very interesting. I'm going to write songs about the things that nobody else writes about. In my first album, I wrote 8 of the 9 songs, which was pretty cheeky, but I didn't know anybody who would give me songs anyway, so nobody knew who I was. So I wrote my own material, and one of the songs I was telling Rangel that it was called Juan González. And the song at the time, when the song came out in America, the only countries that did not have dictatorships were Canada, United States, Mexico, Costa Rica, Uruguay, and Chile. Venezuela was coming out of a dictatorship of Pérez Jiménez. Colombia was coming out of the dictatorship of Roja Pinilla. That in a way also was accelerated by Gabriel. Gabo, when he wrote that chronicle of El Diario de un Náufrago, which helped consolidate the feeling against the dictatorship at the time.
So Ruben, what was the role of the songs that you wrote at that time? Now that you talk about dictatorship, that you were really in front of that. What do you think? I mean, you talk about, you explained me before this, about Padre Antonio, what happened in Uruguay.
The thing is, it wasn't an easy thing, and I don't want to claim that I was the only one doing that, because I was not. There were other people doing this as well. Chico Buarque in Brazil. Chico Buarque, Caetano Veloso, Gilberto Gil, Georgie Ben, Edu Lobo. There were people doing this before, but most of them were in Brazil. And the one thing that I made very clear was that I wasn't going to be involved in ideology. I was not going to write from the point of view of ideology. I was just going to write from a point of view of facts and the way that I understood things to be, but not from an ideological point of view. But still, that created problems. And that's why the first song that I wrote, Juan González, at that time, like I said, he had 13 or 15 dictatorships at the time. You don't write a song about a guerrilla guy who's been killed by the army, the dictatorship, you know. So nobody played that anywhere. The only place that they played that was in Panama. It was a dictatorship. And I found out this by accident. The guy who collected the money from the machines, or los traganíqueles, what do you call that?
Coins.
Jukeboxes. The guy who collected the money from the jukeboxes, I knew. So he came one day. I didn't know that was what he did for a living. He came over one day and said, "Oh my God, your record is a hit in the Clase y Tropa." And I thought he was kidding me. You know, the military really loved your album. I said, your song. He said, "No, I'm not kidding." I said, "What song?" He said, "Juan González." I go, "Really?" He says, "Yes." And I said, "How do you know that?" He knew because that's the song that had the most nickels. So they kept playing. I said, "But how can that be? The song is about a guerrilla guy who's been killed by the dictatorship." He said, "They only like one line in that song." And I said, "How do you know this?" He said, "Because I stayed. I was wondering too." And I said, every time that the line comes out that says, the song says, "La patrulla ha llegado al pueblo con la noticia que acabaron con Juan González el guerrillero, que por fin el león de la sierra reposa muerto. La guerrilla murió con él", grita un sargento. That line, everybody goes, "Yeah!" So they put the song over and over and over just to hear that one line. And I said, wow. At the beginning of the song, I said, I was sure that I was going to get arrested somewhere. And I wrote, I said, well, what can I do with this? I wrote, "La historia," this is the way the song begins. Before that, I said, la historia que van a escuchar está basada en hechos ficticios. Cualquier semejanza con personas vivas o muertas es pura coincidencia.
Like in movies, yeah.
So when they come for me, I said, but no, this is fiction. Didn't you hear what I'm saying? I'm explaining myself from the you know. So anyway,
one of the most shocking stories that you told us last night on a friend of a musician Venezuelan was a concert that you held in Montevideo, where you was the first time that you played Padre Antonio, correct? Mm-hmm. And it was shocking for me. I don't know if you want to share with the people.
I couldn't play in New York City at the time. After I left Willie Colon, we worked with Willie Colon, which is an excellent musician, excellent producer, and allowed me to record things that I felt should be recorded. Willie understood that he really had a sense.
In New York.
In New York. He had a Pan-American sense. It was not easy for me to get with Willie Colon in the band because I was replacing an irreplaceable person called Hector Lavoe. No. So you know, it was touching at the beginning for me to be in the band. But Hector had the band and he was doing well, and I wrote a song for him, El Cantante, which he recorded. It was a wonderful, hit for Hector. So thank you. So, but when I left Willie Colon, when I left the band, I could not get jobs in New York because I tried to create a union. I tried to create a union for musicians here, and it was not, the club owners didn't like that, the managers didn't like that, nobody in the establishment liked that. So when I left Willie, they said, you don't work here anymore, you know. So that's one of the reasons why I created.
This is when?
This is 1982, 83. This is why I created Seis del Solar. Seis del Solar was a small group. I could travel with 6 people. We had been together active in trying to get the union. Rafi Rizari, who's one of the best musicians I know, Ocar Hernandez, and all these guys. So we all had a meeting, and I said how much you want to make, and you know everything's going to be transparent and such and that. But then we couldn't get jobs. The only person that was hiring us to play in a club in the Bronx was David Maldonado and Juan Toro. They gave us gigs every so often. So somebody called Daniel Greenbank from Argentina heard of me. Not on Seis del Solar because we still hadn't recorded. But again, luck. Las Malvinas happens, the Falkland War. It was a shock for the Argentinians to be fighting with the English because Argentina always felt there was a tremendous sympathy towards England. So when the conflict occurred, the songs in English from the radio stations began to be phased out. So they needed now songs in Spanish. So what are we going to play? Oh, well, let's play that thing with the drum that they do over there. I don't know. So then they started to listen to, they didn't dance salsa or anything, but they heard Pedro Navaja and they loved it. They loved that story. And they were like, oh, this is una crónica, che, esto es una crónica, esto es un libro. So they took it and they started playing it and everybody loved it. So all of a sudden, everybody knows who I am. I have no idea.
That was the first story with a character.
Yeah, and a long one. And I didn't know that they liked it. So all of a sudden, Daniel Greenback, who was a rock and roll promoter, a hippie if there ever was one, and he took us to Argentina, the whole band. We were just making the record, Buscando América. It had not been released yet. One of the songs is El Padre Antonio del Monaguillo Andrés, which is loosely based on what was happening in Salvador. Salvador, I don't know if people remember, the young people perhaps don't remember, but what was going on in Salvador was horrible. You had thousands of people killed. It was the priests killed, nuns raped and killed. I mean, it was horrible what was going on there during the dictatorship, what was going on. So I wrote this song about a priest and his altar boy who ended up being killed. But the bells continued to ring, saying death doesn't kill an idea. You cannot kill an idea. But we never played that live. So we went over to Argentina with Daniel Greenback, and we played, and I thought nobody was going to be in the show. And a lot of people went. It helped that we played with a very popular rock group from there called Abuelos de la Nada.
Yeah.
Either Los Abuelos de la Nada or Los Enanitos Verdes. Okay? So that's an early rock, Argentinian rock.
National rock. Yeah.
So we had a tremendous audience. I mean, it was packed, but the government sent people also, and you could tell who they were because they all had black leather jackets on and dark glasses on. They all were very low cut, and they were all standing like this. It would be one and they had a camera. They were filming the whole thing. And what I said, it was one over here, one over here, one over there. But nothing happened. We played Padre Antonio, and that place almost fell. The people, when they came to Suenan las Campanas, and I thought they're going to lose the election. They're going out. Alfonsín is going to win.
Yeah.
This is 1983.
83, yeah.
And Alfonsín from the radical part of the Peronismo was running. So, okay, the next day, and also I remember at this point the dictatorship is weakened because of what happened in La Malvinas.
Claro.
So they were weakened. We went to Uruguay. In Uruguay, the Tupamaro movement had been suppressed, and the dictatorship was not only strong, but they were looking at what was going on in Argentina saying, that's not going to happen here. So we had a curfew when we went to perform. There was a national curfew. So we went to play, and instead of playing in the evening, we were playing in the afternoon. And we played in El Gimnasio Peñarol in Montevideo. So we went in, and it was cold. I remember it was so cold. I had a beard. Nobody knew who I was. They never seen me before. So I remember that I was so cold that I said to one of the guys who worked in the things, can I borrow your jacket? And he had a jacket, like a jacket. So I took it, I put it on, and I came out. And I never liked the thing, and now! I don't like that at all. I don't like that. I don't like it. And then, so I just like to come out and do, but sometimes the MCs, you don't want to take their job away also. So they feel very upset. It's okay. So I said, don't make it so loud. Here it is. And then, but that time, nothing. There was nobody. Nobody. So I went out with the jacket. It was, I never forget that. It was a light blue jacket. So like the color of the flag. With white stripes or something. So I came out, I went to the microphone, I went, hello, hello, hello. And then I turned around and we started to play. And the audience were like, oh, because they thought I was a technician. So that the star would come out, with all the fanfare and all that. So I started to play, and then going back to this long introduction, but I have to tell you this thing, so you set up the thing. We played El Padre Antonio. And I said, this is a song that from an album that we're recording now called Buscando, in Spanish, Buscando América. Es una canción, El Padre Antonio de Monaguillo Andrés. There were about 3,000 people in the place. When we finished the song, it was like now. There wasn't a sound. 3,000 people sang like this. You finish. The band, that had never happened to us. Even when we played bad. Somebody would go, you suck, and say something. Dead silence. and we were like this. And I remember Oscar Hernandez, the piano player, saying, Rubén, ¿qué pasó? Digo, yo no sé, pero vamos a tocar rápido. Man. Let's play. Let's get to the next one now, right away. And we played, and we went home, and we never knew what happened until I was doing a movie 15 years later, I think. I'm doing a film in Buenos Aires with Robert Duvall, who's a wonderful actor. Robert Duvall, you'll know him from Godfather and God knows how many things.
The tango aficionado, too.
Yeah. Well, in tango, the movie was called Assassination Tango. We were always talking about working together. So I'm in Buenos Aires with Robert calls me, let's do a movie. And I said, sure, please. And we went over there. He directed the movie, he wrote it, and so we're over there. And I was off that day, and I was looking at the paper, and I see Jaime Ross, who's an excellent musician from Uruguay, candombe. If you don't know who Jaime Ross is, find his music, wonderful music. And Fatoruso and all those guys were there at the time. And then Jaime is playing in Buenos Aires. I record a song of him called Amándote, which I love, and I never met him. So I went over, bought my ticket, and went to the show. And before I went in, I went to say hello, because I never met him. And I went in, and he had never met me. So we spoke, and he couldn't believe it was me. He thought it was a joke. And then I said, no, I thought, Rubén, what do you need? So one of the musicians says, I saw you when you performed that time with Seiya Solar in Gimnasio Peñarol. And I said, you were there? And I said, yes. I said, do you remember what happened? He said, pretty much I remember the show. He said, do you remember that we played El Padre Antonio and nobody applauded? He said, oh yes, I remember that. How can I not remember that? And I said, did you not applaud because you were concerned that given the fact that there was a military dictatorship, if you applauded, that could have created a problem for you with the government? He said, no. And I thought, oi. So I said, well, why didn't you applaud? He said, we did not applaud out of respect. And I was stunned because, and that's a big lesson, I never forgot that, because every single person in that day on that show felt the same thing. And no one had to get up and speak and say, order nothing. Everybody knew what to do. And what they felt was appropriate was not applause, because what we were talking about what transcended applause or show. We were talking about an idea. And people felt that the strongest statement was silence. Like, and it cleared it for me. I'll tell you one little anecdote also of another friend, excellent musician that I admire, Chico Buarque. Chico wrote a song called Cálice, which was a song that, a game of words. Pai, afasta de mí ese cálice. Cálice is chalice, but it's also shut up. So the military were there, you know. So the military are saying, again, I told you the Trotsky anecdote. Story, yeah. Trotsky was giving out papers. Trotsky, one of the revolutionaries from the early Bolshevik. He was handing out flyers, and the Tsarist police captured him and took him to headquarters. And they said, why are you bringing this man? No, he's giving out these flyers, and then in the street against the Tsar. So the chief of police took the thing, read, understood nothing, and let Trotsky go. He said, no, I don't understand what he's saying, what he's doing. Nobody understands these papers. So the notion is, you know, he's harmless. So, you know, they let you go. So Chico is singing Cálice, and the military is saying, what, are you really telling that we should shut up? That you're telling us not to let you talk? Is that what you're saying? Calici, is that with us? And Chico would say, you can interpret it any way you want. I mean, what am I saying? Pai, father, afasta de mim esse cálice. That's what I'm saying. No, but what he's really saying is that the government is keeping you without a possibility of talking. I said, no, you are doing that. You know, it's like Picasso when the Nazis got him because of the Guernica, the painting, and he said, did you do that? And he said, no, you did that. You know, so now he says, you cannot sing that song again. Huh? If you sing that song, you're going to go to jail. So Chico has a concert in Rio, full house. And he begins to play Cálice, the first notes. And the military are right there, ready to get him to take him. What does Chico do? He doesn't sing it. The people sing it. He just plays melody. So the whole stage, bye, and the 10 cops are going like this. Well, they told us to get him if he sang it. He's not singing it. Yeah. They didn't say anything about him playing it. So, you know, it was, but that moment in Uruguay, I'll never ever forget for as long as.
But you were able to go to South America, but you weren't able to go to Central America to do that thing.
I didn't go, I had to tell you, I didn't go, I'd never been I've only been in Costa Rica. But in those days, you know, it was very difficult. I mean, I did the music, Pam Yates did a documentary called When the Mountains Tremble.
Right, but the differentiation, you explained me that before, that the dictatorship in the South were like, okay, come here, Pinochet. You went to Chile.
We went to Chile, but we got there at a time when I went with Sting and other people. I did a song with Sting called They Dance Along. Actually, I did the Spanish part of the song.
It's a great video.
Then we went to, thank you. We went to, with Amnesty International. But at that point, it
when
wasn't.
Was that?
Huh?
When?
80-something.
Well, I was
No,
opening
Pinochet
up.
was in government. Pinochet was still in government.
But at the end, towards the end.
I mean, Victor Jara, God bless him. Victor Jara was murdered. Victor Jara was murdered. You know, and over there, when by the time we got there, they were kind of in retreat.
In retreat, yeah.
Yeah, no, but the guys who were there, like Victor, you know, 70s, they got it. And in Central America, it was.
You couldn't have gone there. That's my
no,
point.
No way. No, I would have been dead. I would have totally been dead. I mean, absolutely, yeah. No, forget it. My stuff was Victor. I never saw anything that Victor wrote that could be construed as something, you know, ideologically directed to topple a government. They just wanted to set an example. And in those days, in impunity, you know what they did to him. I mean, it's amazing. But they did it around. I mean, it's just. Nothing to me. I mean, my problems came from other sources. You know, I would be the airports. They take you out of the line when you were coming back. They make you lose a flight. You know, they search you. You know, they don't play you on the radio. Mm-hmm. You know, I didn't get played for years here in the radio, because for exiles in Cuba, exiles, I was an apologist of the left. So. You know, I think that situation changed. I mean, I think so. But in those days, it was in the 70s and 80s. It was
very politicized.
I mean, the idea that somebody would talk about the lifting of the embargo, or the idea that somebody would talk or say anything that in any way challenged the narrative of as it was established at the time, and they immediately put you the label of subversive. You know, now Obama went, the Pope went. So
the second time that the Pope goes, two popes.
I will not go. On the other hand, I won't because I don't approve of the without stringency, without standing in front of a box and saying, I understand what the situation is. I personally do not approve or certain things, and I'm not going to be involved in any kind of situation that I don't fully feel comfortable with. So, and everybody knows this. I mean, I've made it public. I made my position clear without stridency, without going me to the extremes, insults and stupid positions. You know, I went with facts. This is the situation. This is what I think. Everybody there knows it. The leadership knows it because I made it clear to them. So, you know, I wish to God one day I can go.
Could you run for president here?
No.
That sounds like it will be so much so welcome.
A lot of interesting things are happening here.
Interesting is a mild way of putting it.
No, but let me tell you, see, everybody right now is very taken with the Trump situation.
That was the question.
I don't find that as interesting or as surprising as having a Jewish socialist running for president.
Yeah.
That to me is really change. You know, the other, I mean, and not only running as a token thing, but with a shot and being supported and with an argument. I think that's fantastic. You know, the other guy, I mean, he's been that way. Why are people surprised? I don't know why are people surprised. I am surprised that it lasted this long.
Right. Well, my question for you is, you are. I mean, I was with my family in a cab yesterday, and I was talking about this, and the guy who was driving said, "Rubén Blades, I want to go." I mean, you are somebody that.
I bet he's not here.
He is around. He's around here for sure.
You know, it's like people tell me, like, "Oh, Ruben, we love you." I said, "Yeah, that's because you don't live with me." You know.
But as a Hispanic, that people really know who you are in the city, what do you think is what represents us for us, Trump, the way that he expressed as an immigrant that we are here in this country?
I don't really believe anything he says.
Right.
You know, I think that.
You don't take it personal.
A long time ago, I learned not to have arguments with drunks. Not to make discussions over religion a part of a party discussion. And in general, I listen to people, and it's not what you talk, it's what you do. So I'm waiting to see what he's going to do. He can talk a storm. He is painting himself in a corner. You know, the problem is his party right now. What are they going to do with him? They, in a way, created this Frankenstein kind of guy, which he is not. He is very smart. He's smarter than anyone gave him credit before. I didn't think he was serious. And I don't know if this is something that dragged in, and then all of a sudden it became sensible. I have no idea. But he bought his own electricity. So, you know, the whole thing about Frankenstein is he needed a professor with a lab to go like this, and he's alive and stuff. This guy, he has the lab. You know, he puts his own juice and he goes wherever the hell he wants. And the problem with the party is that they can't control the monster.
Right.
That's the whole thing. And then you had to choose between him and the unmentionable one. You have to choose between these two. Whoa. You know, so, but I'm saying it's interesting to me to find, and this has been, and this happened before, there's a tremendous change going on right now, I find, in the world. In this particular country, if you had asked me in 1960, I graduated 66, 67 from high school, what do you think will happen first in your lifetime? Will we get to Mars? Or will we see a black man president of the United States? Mars.
Never mind Mars, Jupiter.
I was wrong, and I'm glad I lived to see that. But look what's happening in this one. You have a woman running for president. That is tremendous. You have Bernie Sanders running for president. That is incredible. That is tremendous. And not just running as a token, no. He is running and he has backing. I mean, especially from the younger part of society. People are tired of the same narrative, the same story, the same thing. They're looking for something else. And then you have Mr. Trump, who is being Mr. Trump. I mean, I can't wait to see the White House with a big thing that says Trump House. Build gold letters like this big. And so, but I'm saying, hey, that's going to be interesting to see what happens now.
Yeah.
But your question?
My question was about
How do I see him?
how do you see him as a
I really don't know if he's going to, if he's serious about all the stuff he's talking about. Like, first of all, it's not feasible to deport 11 million people. It's not feasible to build an $81 billion wall. I mean, these are crazy things. I mean, I don't think he is crazy. I think he says it, and it gets an applause, and the applause translates itself into some support of votes and whatnot. When it comes now to go out to the street, he can't come up with that kind of stuff because I don't think people are going to respond to that. Our problem, and this brings me to something I was saying before. Look, one thing is to be Latin American, and another one is to be born in the United States from parents who came or are from Latin America. In that sense, we have to be very careful when we use the word Latino. I am a resident of the United States. I've been a legal resident of the United States since 1977. If any day something should happen here and they consider, they meaning the government, considers that I am a persona non grata, they don't have to explain to me anything. They just call me one day and said, you know what, pick up your stuff and go back to wherever the hell you came from. And they cancel my thing, and that's the end of it. If it's someone, an artist, Jennifer Lopez, whom I love and think is one of the best actresses that had not received all the credit that she deserves. She's great. But Jennifer, she's going to be deported to where, New York? You know, so you have to make a difference between that.
Descendant.
Yes, because when Trump talks about Latinos, he's putting Mark Anthony, Jennifer Lopez, and myself in the same box, and that's not right.
Right.
Because what he's doing is he's ignoring their rights, which they have as equals for having been born in this country.
Right.
And that is very, very, very important to have that point clear. Having said that, we in Latin America, again, we're not a race. We talk about la raza in a metaphorical sense, but we have blacks, we have whites, we have mestizos,
Chinese.
we have Chinese, we have Jewish people, Catholics, Protestant, Buddhists, Muslims, we have all that. So you can't talk about the Latino, it's like so complex.
Yeah.
So that, and then that's one part of the thing. The other part of the scenario is that we behave like tribes. You know, you have the Mexican tribe, you have the Cuban tribe, then you have the Dominican tribe.
I know the Venezuelan tribe.
And then you have the Venezuelan tribe, and then the Central American tribe. And because we are separated by these sectorisms, we don't tend to articulate things as one. We don't have a person that articulates positions for all of us. And that has always been a problem, an issue. When the black community here, and I tell you from all that, and I met many people in this country through all the years that I've been here, and I will tell you that one of those people that I feel blessed that I had the pleasure to shake her hand was Rosa Parks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we spoke, I was invited to speak at a Harry Belafonte event in 1980 something, or late 70s, early 80s, and I was one of the speakers, and she was one of the speakers. And I mean, if Rosa Parks that one day, you know, she said, no, I'm not going to get up. No, arrest me, I'm not getting up. She was arrested. What did the black community do? We're not riding those buses anymore. And now we're going to walk. We got to walk 9 miles to get to the job. Okay. So before we used to get at 7 o'clock to get the bus and sit in the back of the bus, you know what? Let's get up at 4. And we're going to walk. And we're not giving these people a dime. And that's what they did. And things began to change. if the Latino community in this country decided, and I'm talking about Latinos and American, North Americans born here, from Latino, we said, you know what, we're not going to drink Coca-Cola for a whole month, and we're not going to have Budweiser, and we're not going to go to the movies. You know?
Or no, we're not stay in the Trump hotels.
Well, we don't go there to begin with. But if we did that, and they felt it here, they're not going to feel it here. No, here. They're going to feel it here.
Yeah.
And that they feel it there, then things begin to change. There are arguments for this in the past. In the 1920s, the figure of the greaser was very popular in the works of Hollywood authors, the westerns. The greaser was always a Mexican-looking guy with hair, all messed up and sticky and rotten teeth, and always, the thing, big mustache, of course. How much for your children? That kind of guy. And it was horrible guy, who did all the horrible things, raped cats and did all kinds of things. And then these guys the Mexican government got fed up. And I remember who was it? I think Porfirio Díaz, a lo mejor. Usted called people in Latin America, and we're not going to watch more Hollywood movies. Wow. And in Panama, the president at the time was Belisario Porras. This is the 20s. And there was a front made. And stop watching U.S. movies. And you know what? The greaser disappeared. Wow. For a while. Disappeared. Why? Because it hurt here. So I hope, I don't know if I'm ever going to see that, but.
Talking about, just write your question because we're going to start the Q&A right now.
Yeah, one more thing I wanted to say before, because this part is important.
Okay,
okay, say it.
We, as a Venezuelan, we had a bad experience with no traditional politician running for president. And of course,
he's talking about Pérez Jiménez.
we have very bad experience. We usually don't advise the U.S. people about anything, but in that respect, we don't have a very good experience. We have a government that came with a social promise, and right now we have a new elite that is in control of the government, and we have, as you know, social unrest, almost a humanitarian crisis going on in Venezuela. And of course, I have to ask you as a Venezuelan, what is your take in
I think,
what is happening?
again, it's one of those situations, and what makes this, an opinion about Venezuela difficult is that the country is so polarized. That polarization, by the way, is changing. At one point, it was very defined. At one point, it was, as the last election seemed to suggest, 49-51. That's almost cut in half. So one half is okay and the other half is not okay. That is beginning to shrink.
Yeah, the last election was different.
Was different, and by now people are upset in general. But when you look at the background of how this whole thing began, you also have to make responsible the governments under democracy, Adeco and Copellano, who didn't do what they were supposed to do, and created the terreno, the possibility for what is happening today. We'll not forget that Chavez won every election that he went to because people felt that what he was saying and the way he looked, the way he spoke, reflected more on their reality. Nothing to do with capacity or not of administration, which everybody has proven horrible. To be, I mean, I cannot believe, when I was in government in Panama, a barrel of oil was $100. Not 9 or 10 or 12, 100. And that incredible opportunity was wasted away is really unforgivable. Forget about whether it is left or right. Anyone who has done something like that, it's totally unforgivable. Right now, I think that there's going to be a change. I think it's a matter of time. I don't know what is going to precipitate the change. Most likely it will be first an internal situation. I don't think that the present situation can the change can be avoided. I don't think so. The question is, who are going to be the ones responsible for bringing the new situation forward? Because right now, one problem of the opposition is that they're divided. And, people are also looking at that. But the deterioration in general is coming at such speed that my concern is that the upcoming change will be a military coup. I say that because in any circumstance when the institutions fall, the only institution that can create some semblance of order is the military. And that's what they're going to come in. The problem is they come in and they inherit a mess.
Right.
So that is the one thing that I don't see that happening on a logical, but I didn't think Trump was going to be this far either. But I just wanted to tell you something that is very important before I forget. It's something that he mentioned before, talking about lyrics and salsa music. This is important, and then I'll take all your questions. Many years ago, I've been lucky that I got to meet wonderful people and work with wonderful people and learn from them. And I was lucky to be friends with some of these people. And I'm going to mention two people. One is Carlos Fuentes from Mexico, the writer, and who was at the time also teaching at Harvard when I was there. And the other one is Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Gabo. Gabo was a musician also. He loved music. Yeah, he loved to sing, and he loved not just vallenatos. He loved music in general. And he was very, very clear about the fact that some of us writing songs were writing literature as well. That was his position. That is debatable. Some people say, no, salsa music. No, that's just music for dancing, escaping, and whatnot. Gabo would say, Pedro Navaja, for instance, was a chronicle. It's almost like a newspaper article. So one day we're having a conversation about literature and music. And I said, and we're talking about this, but we always going around the same thing. And I said, Gabo, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sing a short story. He said to me, but you're already doing that. I said, no. I'm going to sing a short story. I'm going to write a short story, and I'm going to sing it. And Gabo, whenever Gabo got excited about something, he turned into a little boy. His face, he just looked at me, and he had that kind of smile coming out of here. He said, how are you going to do that? Because now he's intrigued. I said, I'm going to write it like this. No, permiso. And he had a paper. I said, give me that maestro. He said, singer and songwriter who recorded some records. And I'm going to just sing it, whatever comes to my mind. Because he said, how are you going to have an arrangement made? I said, no arrangement. It's all ad-libbed, whatever comes up. And he said, oh. And I said, I'm going to do this, and no one's going to know. I'm going to put it on an album. I'm going to record it, put it on an album, a salsa album, and nobody's going to find out that this is a short story. They're going to say, oh, that's a salsa song. But it's a real short story. So he said, oh, that's interesting. I said, well, only you and I are going to know this. So I did it. One day, I was recording on West 46th Street. Those of you, how many New Yorkers here living in New York? Yeah, New Yorkers, okay. I'm going to tell you something you probably don't know. And I know I don't know a lot of things also, but this one I do. On 46th, 47th Street, there's like a grill area. It's changed a lot, no? But if you walk around that area, there's like a grill. And now you can actually hear it. But all in the past, I heard it one time that I was coming from recording at around 4 o'clock in the morning. and it had snowed. There was no one in the streets.
46 and what?
46 on Broadway, and 7th. 7th. I'm walking and I hear this. Like a didgeridoo almost, you know. And I go, what is that? Sound like a big generator or some kind. And I started to look where it was, and I noticed it was coming from below. So I look at where I was, and I couldn't see because of the snow. And then the next day I came. Before I went to the studio, I went back and I listened, and there it was. And I said, what is that?
A Mongolian throat singer. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, you're right, yeah, exactly. But then I'm going like, no, but that's coming from below. And I went over to check, what was it? And nobody knew what I was talking about when I went to the subway downstairs. And the guy that thinks I'm drunk or something. Yeah, you hear that sound out there? Gonna buy a ticket, sir? Or not, move. Yeah. So finally somebody says, no, you gotta talk to, because I was insistent, I wanted to know. And they told me it is una escultura sonora. Wow. They said it's a sound sculpture done by some Danish person, artist. And the purpose of the sound sculpture is to blend itself with the sounds of New York, which is perhaps why when we walk by it, we don't pay attention to it. So, and it was very successful at that. So I came over and with a tape recorder, which I still own, by the way. You can't buy them, not in the internet. Every so often one shows up, a cassette player. I went over and I recorded it. And I took it to the studio and I asked John Fausti, the engineer, to do a loop. So he did the loop, and then I took the short story and I said, John, we're only doing this once. John, once. Okay, let's go. And I start to sing the short story. What you heard in the album, it's in Buscando America. What you heard in the album, it's only that one take. Because I felt it would have, if I had gone with not some kind of vanity about my voice and mistakes, and then I would have defeated the purpose. The purpose was to have something done that moment, instantly, no tweaks, nothing. This is it. So I went, despiertas, no has podido dormir muy bien, te levantas, caminas y pisas uno de los charcos de orines que el nuevo perro ha dejado por toda la casa. It's called GDBD, GDBD. Gente despertando bajo dictadura. People awakening under dictatorships. So I read the whole short story and sang it, and nobody knew. When I went to Medellin 2 years ago to Gabriel Garcia Marquez memorial, I told a story, and it was they were going to give an award to the best chronicle or the best newspaper. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they were all there. And then I said, I'm going to tell you a story about Gabriel and I. And I told them the story. But before I played the song, I read the short story. And then I said, you heard it? Okay, this is what we did. And this is what I did. And then we played them the song. And the reason, and I thank you for listening, because it's the ultimate proof that salsa can be literature. No discussion after this one, because it's been there. And I waited, 33 years. So it's been proven. For 33 years, we did this in 83. So
I have so many questions.
No, it's okay, I have time.
So I'm gonna go with 3 questions, and you comment. There are different types. Can you give us a scoop about the Fair of the Walking Dead?
Can you give us an inside scoop?
Oh, the thing is that I can't really talk much about it.
And another one.
I won't tell it anymore.
No, but
Okay. One person here want to know about Patria, about a little bit of the story of Patria, the lyrics. Una te lo voy a leer en español. Rubén, ¿qué solución ves con respecto a la crisis de niños centroamericanos migrando solos e ilegalmente a los Estados Unidos?
Ok. La primera, sobre la crisis de los niños migrando, digo, lo primero que tenemos que ver es cómo vamos a corregir las condiciones que hacen que esos niños tengan que emigrar. Eso es lo primero que tenemos que hacer. O sea, cómo nosotros podemos crear unas condiciones que impidan que las madres tomen esas decisiones tan horrorosas. O sea, lo difícil que tiene que ser para una madre dejar que su hijo o su hija se les vaya de las manos con un extraño a otro país. Eso te da una idea del grado de desesperación que hay. Eso no es una decisión fácil para ningún padre. You know? It's very hard. The question is about what should we do with the immigration of children from Central America to the United States. I said the first thing we have to do is to address the conditions that create the need for these kids to leave. That's the thing we have to stop. That's what we have to look at. You know, and it's a concerted effort. It can be fixed. Everything can be fixed. I tell you because I was in government 5 years. This is the one thing I learned. You can fix things from government. But you need to have the support of the people, and you also need to change. We need to want to change. You know, but it is possible. It's not a dream.
And in this case, I think international support will help that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Look what happened in Panama now with the Panama Papers. What did the president of Panama do? You know? And make no mistake, this was directed against Panama. This was not something that happened. They could have called it Mossack Fonseca Papers.
Claro.
That's what they should have called them. They didn't. They call them Panama Papers, very specifically, Pocoto. Why? Because I think they want the business to come to Nevada or to South Dakota or to Wyoming. You know, you took care of first Switzerland, now let's take care of Panama. And now the business is going to come over here. And in Nevada right now, you have more businesses in the same situation and condition. And there's no hacking, and nobody talks about who hacked. Isn't that funny? And then not all the information has been released. When you have the two biggest hackers in the world, the guy from Snowden and the other one, the first one, Hassan. When you have those two guys saying, something's wrong here about this hacking, you go, whoa, what is wrong? They release everything. The two of them released everything. These guys, no, they have not released everything. They release it very slowly, and they decide what they release and what they don't release. And I always found that's very strange. And in Panama, but the president of Panama, and I'm not saying that we don't have a problem of laundering in Panama. I'm not saying that. What I'm referring specifically is to this situation. Now, what the president did was interesting. He invited a forum. He invited Stiglitz, the economy professor from here, from Colombia, and other relevant figures to come to Panama, and with the support and collaboration of Panamanian professionals, create the plan and program that will help bring clean up, to produce transparency in the situation. I thought that was wonderful. And my suggestion in my article, those of you who are not a part of my webpage, please join, because I don't write for papers, I write in my webpage. And the reason I don't write for papers is that every paper, in my opinion, has an editorial line that is supported by the direction of the owners and or advertisers. I write my own stuff, I'm responsible for it, I publish it in my webpage. I just, this morning, I published a comment on this that I'm making right now. It's very easy, rubenblades.com, go there.
Very creative too.
You're talking to a man who doesn't drive a car. The first time I used an internet, bottles of champagne were popping up in 5 continents. I mean, I'm really 18th century.
There are very, very important questions here about Puerto Rico, for example. What is your take on what is happening in Puerto Rico?
Okay.
And also, Cuba, there is somebody who asked about, the role of artists for social change and why so many, and I relate two questions here. Why in Cuba there haven't been a movement of musicians?
I think there has been. I think there has been. Don't make the mistake of thinking that because you don't hear about it, it's not happening. It's like some people saying, like, how come people don't do boleros anymore? No, they're doing boleros. We just don't hear them. They're not out there. So, but there are artists in Cuba, many of them, not just Varela, Carlos Varela, all kinds of artists right now.
More and more. More and more.
Yeah, more and more that are working and doing things that are very interesting. We will find about them as the conditions there improve in terms of diffusion of what is being done.
Puerto Rico.
The thing with Puerto Rico that concerns me the most is this. I never understood why. No one, not one political party in Puerto Rico have defined what would the island do if it acquires independence. For instance, what are we going, and I say we because Puerto Rico is like my second home, okay? What are we going to do to feed the people of Puerto Rico, for instance? What kind of industry do we have? What kind of earnings are we going to produce to support independence? What are we going to do to make the country sustainable? What are we going to do? Right now, and I used to have this discussion with los independentistas. I said, we can all talk about freedom and all that. That is all very good and necessary. But people have to eat too. You don't eat sovereignty. You also have to have an argument that supports this. We can't just go, flag waving. It's like, what are we going to do with this? And I don't see anything at this point, for instance. What are we going to do once this crisis is stabilized? How did we end up here?
That's the first question.
Irresponsibility. Not just fiscal. All of us have to do with this thing. All of us, one way or another. So, okay, we know that. Now it's not the time to go, what's your fault, Okay, no. Let's do what the Japanese do. Let's fix it. Instead of wasting time, accusing people. We're all in it. What are we going to do now? Okay, first of all, I think Congress should allow Puerto Rico to declare bankruptcy and to reorganize itself. They're not, the Congress right now, because of the peculiar status of Puerto Rico, everybody's passing the buck, No, we can't do this. No, we can't do that, I think there's special allowances should be made at this point to stop stop the bleeding, because the concern right now is that social services are being interrupted every day. People are also leaving. Hospitals are being closed. People are getting a sense of this not going to get fixed, and then people are splitting. And you cannot allow that to happen. So I think that the United States has a tremendous responsibility by having also, in one way or another, not acted before. And perhaps now is the time to clarify that and redeem that sort of indifference. But at this point, Puerto Rico needs federal support, I think. But okay, having said that, what are we going to do afterwards? Because, okay, so you stop this. Now, what are we going to do to make the island sustainable? That is the thing that I don't see. For instance, Puerto Rico right now, with tourism, as always was, a very strong resource. But you know what? When Cuba's open, bye Dominican Republic, bye Puerto Rico. Everybody's going to go to Cuba. So, that's going to be the number one destination. So what are we going to do for food? What are we going to do for jobs in Puerto Rico? So we have to be thinking about that. What are the strengths that Puerto Rico has? How can we build those strengths and make them competitive? you know? And how are we going to really develop a strategy long-term that is not subject to political nonsense? That's what we need to do. And that's what we need to do now. But the first thing that needs to be done, the government, the United States government has to allow Puerto Rico to reorganize itself and stop, diddling, which is what's happening right now. But so the thing with Cuba that I mean is once this thing changes, the status changes, people are going to want to go there because it's almost unknown. It's the unknown land. And whether some people like that or feel it's unfair, whatever, nothing to do with the reality of something that has been closed for 60 years. All of a sudden, oh my God, I want to go there. And what do they think that they're going to find? I don't know. But they want to go to the place. They want to go to the place that they haven't seen before. And if you can go to Puerto Rico any day, or you can go to the Dominican Republic or Panama any day, but not every day you're going to go to Cuba. And that's what I'm saying. At the beginning, it's going to be, and once the circumstances changes there, you're going to have, Cuba is a very well-educated country. And they have managed to survive in spite of imperialism and communism. Both hitting at each other and the Cubans resolviendo. Voy a resolver como sea. And they have survived in a way that just always brings me back to Japan and Germany and Europe in general, Poland, all those places that suffered during the war. But I mean suffered, devastation. So imagine what it is to live 50-something years constantly getting punched. You survive, my friend. When you come out of there, you're going to be the best in the lot. When things normalize, we're crying here about, look, this has a dent here. I'm not going to drink this. Jesus. Over there, people are like inventing, they have cars from like 1902 that are like, there's no gasoline, forget about it. Put a little Coke with a little kerosene and spit it. It's like, what they're doing is amazing, how they managed to survive all these years. So I think that the good times, they deserve that also. They deserve to be free and enjoy their life.
Although when you say that for 60 years it had been closed, well, it had been closed to the United States. It was open to the rest of the world.
Yes, to a degree, yes. I mean, I'm basically talking about U.S. Tourism, basically.
Okay, people want to know about Panama. You're thinking, of course, are you going to run? And the development of the Panama City, we were talking about that, the infrastructure, the Casco Viejo, the freeway. I mean, a lot of urbanistic stuff.
I'm considering the following, and I'm very careful about this, and I wrote about this because every time somebody asks me that question, then the headline is, he's going to run. And I think that we in Panama, we can change whatever is not working. I think we can change it very quickly. We have the resources to do so, both natural and the people. Yeah. We have it. What we need is a motive on a national scale that make people believe again in institutions. And we need to reform what exists today. I think we need to do it through constitutional changes. We need to make sure that we know what needs to be changed before we go over talking about promising things that cannot be delivered. What I'm doing right now is I'm paying all debts that I have because I don't want to become involved in a process with debts. I would not risk winning an election and then find that I still have debts. I'm not going to be, if I were to end up working in government again, and I know because I went for 5 years, the 5 years I went through, 2004, 2009, every time I mention this, people in Panama, some people, not everybody, especially political people who don't agree with me or don't want me to even be breathing, say, but you always talk about that. It's like you're always complaining. I'm not complaining. What I have to say is that as opposed to some of the politicians that are now in jail or being investigated there, when I left, I was not richer. The 5 years I was there, I didn't do, hey, ¿qué pasó? The last those 5 years that I was there, I didn't do tours, I didn't do movies, I didn't do albums. You know, I just worked in what I needed to do. When you come out of there, nobody's saving your position. Nobody was in line waiting, saving your spot in the movies. You come out older. As you get older, people are colder. In terms of jobs, in terms of opportunities, you know, I went through all of that, and I'm not crying about that, because what I want in my life, in my spirit, in my mind, what I learned, nothing can give it to me. Money can't give you that. But the reality of the whole salud, but the reality of the whole thing is that I can't do that. I'm 68. I'm going to be 68 now in July. In 2019, I'll be 71 if I'm alive. I will. You never know. And if I were to run, then I would be out by 76. At 76, I'm not going to be singing Pedro Navajo.
Who knows?
No. I know. Let me tell you this. You all reach every single one. And the younger people, pay attention. Pay attention. People that are 30 years old, you're middle age. You know, people think 30, I'm going to be 30 all my life. No, you're not. What's the average? 80? Okay, when you're 40, not 30. You're in the middle of it. When you're 67 or going 68, you know you have more past than future. Unless you're an idiot. You look at it and you go, you know what? Okay. The Everest, I'm not going to climb that one. No. And I'm not going to be I'm not going to play delantero for Barcelona. I can't do it anymore. Okay, what can you do? What is possible? What is worth it? How are you going to go about it? And then start, because your life continues. There's no end to life. There's no end to education. You always have to educate yourself. And there's no end to the contributions you can make. That's nonsense. Society is so fixed with looking good. You know, people, you know, are so upset about, you know, I mean, I'm vain. I lost my hair. So what? Is that going to keep me going? No. Do I miss it? Yes. But you know what? But then again, I remember, you know what God did? God created just a certain amount of perfect heads. And the rest, he covered with hair. Okay? So, but I'm saying, if I'm going to run, I need to be clear about not just my personal finances, but also I have to be clear about what I'm going to do and say. And I'm working on that. But I'm not making noise about that. And also, if I run, I would have to run as an independent. We have to find out what the changes are, because they're right now in the midst of electoral changes. We don't know what the results are going to be. But I tell you this, Panama is a great country. And it's got great people. It really does. It really does. It really does. It really does. And, you know, everybody says the country is the best, and that's fine. I had tremendous, tremendous faith in our capacity to do things and do them properly. So if I can use at this time in my life, if I can use whatever I know and whatever amount of credibility I still have and help to advance an idea that could somehow contribute to better the conditions of my country, that's what I'm going to do. I don't have a problem with that. Some people thought, no, he's not going to do it. You know how many people thought that I was going to finish the 5 years in Panama? Very few. Very few. There were polls being made, bets. I swear to God, I didn't know this. You know how I found out? I was leaving Panama, and a guy I don't know came to me and shook my hand and said, thank you for everything, that the 5 years. And I said, well, thank you. He said, no, but I had to tell you, thank you, really. And I said, Okay? I'm not kidding. I joke, but I'm not kidding.
Did you find out what the odds were in the bets?
No, I didn't ask him, but I wish I had. But he said to me, I said, why are you so happy? He says, everybody thought that you weren't going to last the 5 years, and I bet for you, and I won. So I should have asked, what were the odds?
What are the odds?
But the odds were better than the odds of
So,
Trump getting
more question about lyrics of your songs. I asked you about Patria, about Desaparecidos.
Patria was a song that I wrote when Noriega was in power. I was not there. I wrote the song. There's a line there that says, no memorice lecciones de dictadura o encierro. A la patria no la define el que suprime a su pueblo. You know, I always wondered why that song was not utilized at the time more. When Noriega, one of my albums, Buscando América, was banned in Panama. But what they did was they actually banned a song, Decisiones. He said that Decisiones was a call for abortion. You know, I mean, they were looking for how they, and then people, yeah, you know, people sang anyway the song. But what they did, in fact, was ban the album. So you could, there were some songs that just were not being played on the radio. I never had anything that I felt directly. He was responsible for my father and my family leaving Panama. You know, that's why my family left. That's another thing, that people think that I just graduated and left because I wanted to be a musician. That's not how it worked. I said already, I was not working as a musician when I in 1974. I left because I wasn't going to be a lawyer under a dictatorship. And I left because my family left in 73. You know? And when my family left in 73, I was very happy that they were gone, in a way, because now I could have all the time in the world for myself and the ladies and all that. And you know what happened when they left? I felt horrible. I had anxiety attacks. I felt terrible. I felt miserable when my family left. I didn't realize how much they meant to me until they were gone. And so when I graduated, I came from Coiba, I worked with the people in prison, and then I didn't even go to my graduation. One of the reasons I went to Harvard was my mother and my father were working people, working class people. I was the first one to graduate from high school and university. And my mother's dream was to see me graduate. But they left, 73. So I got my diploma in the dean's office. They gave it to me. I took it to the Supreme Court. They registered it I donated, and then I left. You know, I didn't go to my graduation. So nobody in my family saw me graduate. So when the situation came at Harvard, I actually went there, and my mother, before she died, she saw me graduate. You know, and that was a very special thing. I'm very, very glad that happened. But that's pretty much the scenario.
Okay, different question. What is your position on the negotiation between the FARC and the Colombian government?
I think it's due. I mean, overdue. I mean, that is a scenario that should have been resolved a long, long time ago, and I don't understand why it's the way it's going. I mean, it should have been. I thought for a fact that it was going to be resolved about a year ago. So I don't understand why it hasn't been resolved yet. But I hope it does. I mean, Colombia is another wonderful place. Hard-working people. And they are turning the corner. I mean, Medellin right now, Medellin is turning the corner in terms of the perception that people have of Medellin. And I tell you, I mean, I went to Colombia when things were really difficult at the time. They were difficult there, and then I've been back since. As a matter of fact, I'm right now working with somebody from Restrepo, a guy, a young architect that is graduated from the University of Hamburg in Germany, and he's working right now in Medellin with a project of public housing that I'm going to hopefully use also in Panama. So and Medellin right now is it won as a best city. You know, best modern city. So you know, Colombia is turning the page. I hope that this situation finally is resolved.
seeing that most of the phenomenal people that you work with have died, Barreto, Cheo,
God bless him.
what are your thoughts on the role that you play as one of the surviving salsa icons?
You know, it's interesting about that. People ask me, you know, so what do you think your contribution has been? You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, again, that's like saying, I got 14 Grammys. It's like, I think time will determine that. Really, is going to determine what happened. I know that I have pictures where everybody's dead but me. You know, when you see that, that's sobering. That's like Richard Pryor discovering fire. You know what I mean? It's like it sobers your ass very quickly. You're looking at the thing and you go, gone, 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 gone. Well, that's me. So I do think that you continue to produce, like I said before. I don't understand this whole notion about, it's one thing I love to do from government in Panama, is to take the advantage of all the experience of all the people. Can you imagine that we have a doctor in Panama that has been the kind of doctor that sees you walking and knows pretty much what's wrong with you? And then you're going to phase him out because he or she is 72 or 73. It's like, you know what it took for that knowledge to be created, and you're just going to get rid of these people? You kidding me? Like I said, you got to use that knowledge. Just don't make him play soccer. Or don't take him, don't give him something that they can't do.
Well, Panamanians are not too good at playing soccer anyway.
About baseball.
Baseball.
We're a lot better. We're getting better. But I'm saying, so the fact at the end of the day of how my contributions will be measured, like I said before, and this is very important to say it over and over and over, I did not reach there by myself. I mean, I had arrangers who helped me to get there, great bands that helped me to get there. The people that helped me, continue, the audiences that came to see the shows. So, but I mean, I'm happy that I made the decisions that I made as far as lyrics. Because at the time, people were writing stuff like "Vente mamá, vamos a gozar," and I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that because we need to escape. We need to escape. We all need to escape. But I felt also music could document reality. So that part of it, I know people like René from Calle 13, to mention one artist, he's picked up a lot of the stuff and took it elsewhere. And gave it a different direction and made it better. I mean, I did an album with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, for instance. I'd be very interested to find out what's going to happen with that. We did it, like I said, Gabriel loved music, and one day I said, why don't we make an album together? And he said, oh, that's a great idea. I said, well, let's start writing the lyrics. And he said, no. And I said, why not? Of course, I want to be associated with you writing. And he said, no. And I said, why not? He said, because we will never finish. And I said, okay, because you're going to be writing stuff, and then I'm going to be writing, and then you're going to be changing, and I'm going to, you do it. And I said, okay. Then I said, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to write adaptations of your short stories. And again, the smile, okay, what are you going to do? I'm going to interpret your short stories. And I'm not going to, I met Gabriel before the novel. And this is important because when, everybody, you have like Gabriel before the novel and the Gabriel after the novel. After the novel, everybody's flunking, and before that, we were like pretty much in the same kind of boat, Actually, they knew me a little more than he. It's so funny. And then he said, well, you do it. And I said, I'm going to do, but I'm going to interpret your, and that was interesting because it's like this bottle that has this thing in the front. He made the bottle, but he's never seen the back of the bottle. I'm watching now the back of the bottle. And I'm watching the side of the bottle. So I'm going to write about that. So in a way, you lose control over what you create. So somebody else now is going to give their opinion on it. And you don't know what that's going to be. So I did the record. I never had an album more attacked and less liked in my whole life. I remember that I never.
And you blame him for that.
No, no. We used to laugh about that, but not in public. The review of the Village Voice, and I don't think it was Chris Go. I don't remember who wrote it. The review of the album was called Agua de Luna. That means water, moon water.
Water.
The review of the Village Voice was water in the brain. I remember I sent him a letter. I said, "Why didn't you just call it hydrocephalia?" They did not like it. And Gabriel Gabo one day called me. When Gabo came to the States in those days, but even after after the award and all, Gabo was considered by some as subversive still, because of his friendship with Fidel Castro and his contacts with lefty groups. So he wasn't a list. If he couldn't leave the airport, he couldn't go beyond 2-3 miles, something like that. So what he would do is he would call friends from the airport. So he calls me one day, and I'm home. I was so happy. I was home. Pick up the phone. Hello, he said, hey, I don't like to talk on the phone. So I'm very curt on the phone, almost repulsively curt, And I said, hello. And people said, hola. Yeah, I don't want to talk until I'm talked to. ¿Quién es? Gabo. Hey, ¿qué pasó? Me dice, tú eres el desconocido más popular que yo conozco. Digo, espérate un momentito. And I went running and I got a piece of paper to write this down, because that was very funny. El desconocido más popular que yo conozco. Digo, what's that mean? He said, I talk about you, but people don't know what you look like. And then if they know what you look like, they don't know you're a lawyer. And if I talk to them about the song, they don't know you wrote it. And I talk to them about you, and then they don't know you wrote the song. And they always know something about you, but not. Por eso eres el desconocido más popular que yo conozco. Digo, oye, that's very funny. Me dice Gabriel, mira, le digo, ¿y cómo está? Dice, aquí muy cansado. Digo, ¿por qué? Se me duelen los brazos y me duele la lengua ya. Digo, ¿por qué? Me dice, de estarte defendiendo. We sold, I think about, I don't know. I think him and I bought the records. But there's a song from that album, there's about 3 or 4 songs that I really love about that record. One of them survived, and we still play it on the shows. Es Ojo de Perro Azul.
Tremendo.
Oscar Hernandez did an arrangement for that song. That is, a tremendous chart. It's very jazz. That's why we used to play with Saya Solar. We used to play in a lot of jazz concerts. I remember to this day, whenever I talk about Ojo de Perro Azul, I remember Miles Davis and Dizzy in a Playboy Jazz Festival in the Hollywood Bowl. Miles loved this song. He just loved this tune. And you would see them both dancing there on the aisles. So somebody did like the thing. But in general...
It's not about the quantity.
No, the quality. But the fact that people, nobody liked it. The people who were intellectuals thought that I was being presumptuous, arrogant, and an idiot because I did not interpret the stories correctly. And then the salsero thought I was just spitting on salsa and doing some crap bullshit that they didn't want to know about. So nobody bought the record.
Something important for new musician. Somebody asked here, ¿qué piensa del reto de los nuevos músicos en el género? Imagino que se refiere a la salsa, sin apoyo de los medios. Pregunta una hijada de Papo Luca que está aquí.
Oh, wow. Papo Luca is one of the best musicians in the world. Yeah. Papo Luca is such a good musician that I saw him do something once with the Funny All Stars that taught me a lesson for the future when I have my own band. And it's this. When you have a talent like Papo Luca, and the Funny All Stars are playing, and Papo is going to do a solo, the piano, you never ever let them come in to listen to what they did. Because Pacheco, if Johnny Pacheco was the Funny All Stars leader, Papo took a solo that was smoking. I think it was Juan Pachanga, which I sang. Luis Ramirez, excellent Luis Ramirez, also musician. Luis did the music, I did the lyric. So, and I wasn't supposed to sing that song. That song was somebody else was going to sing it, but didn't show up. And then Pacheco said, put the vocal, and I went. I was still working in a mailroom in Fania. So I put the best vocal I could, with sonero, and I was really ready. So I put it in, and then Pacheco decided to leave it like that. I don't know how that happened. But Papo took the solo, and Pacheco was so happy, Papo, come in. Papo comes in, listen to the solo. I said, déjame hacer otro. And went out. And Pacheco, I was in the booth. And Pacheco told John Fausti, don't erase it. So, okay, that's toma uno, take one. Pacheco, Papo goes, another smoking solo, comes in, déjame hacer otro. 2. Hey, it went to 7. 7 tremendous solos. And I thought to myself, I will never, ever, if I'm ever a band leader, I will never let this happen because you can only use one. So you have to erase the other 6. And then each one in itself was a jewel because Papo, Luca, cannot make mistakes. Some of the people that I had the pleasure to work with, they're so good in what they do that they couldn't do wrong anymore. They couldn't do it wrong anymore. I mean, and what a blessing it is to be with that kind of people around you. As we were in the 60s, late 60s and the 70s, even part of the 80s. I mean, you go to places and you would be with John Lennon like this close, like this. Chet Baker, you could pick a cigarette from Chet Baker. I bought a cigarette from Chet Baker. And watching Lee Konitz play in a little place called Strikers that no longer exists.
Oh.
Cecil Taylor, we would be like playing with Oscar Robertson. It would be with like all of these giants. I mean, and it would be like an everyday kind of thing. Machito, God bless him, with Tito Puente and Mario Bauzá and all those guys. Did you know that Mario Bauzá was the one who introduced Ella Fitzgerald to Chick Webb? Mario Bauzá introduced Ella Fitzgerald to Chick Webb, and I mean that was a connection that existed between jazz and salsa at the time. And then you have people like you mentioned, Ray Barreto is one of the best musicians all around, wonderful people I ever met, and I'm so glad that he was my mentor in ways. He was the first band that I worked with. And you were around these people every day. I mean,
so in this era for like
kids.
Young musician,
you know what? I think this is the best of times. It's like a tale of two cities.
Yeah.
It's the best of times, the worst of times. It's the best of times because in my day, my first contract with a record label and a record tycoon was with Morris Levy. Morris Levy is kind of like, anybody here seen Vinyl and HBO? It's kind of like that. In the old days, if you wanted to record, you had to sign with a label. You sign with the label, and if you want to record, if you want distribution, and if you want the song to be played anywhere. So you sign and you get like a penny. Supposedly you get a penny per song. A penny. But then first, before the penny, they take out all the expenses. And they don't show you the bills. They don't know how much you spent. And if you do, you're a troublemaker and you want me to fire you? So now you can record in your house. You can record with this. You can do a movie with this. So now is the best of times. And now you can bring it over you can put it in the internet. Mm-hmm. You can put your own stuff in the internet. And is this a Papoluca thing? Oye, qué bien. Well, gracias. Can't go wrong with him. Entonces, so you can do, it's very exciting. You can do whatever you want now. The problem here is how do you get what you do? How do you make it be heard? That's the problem. What I've been doing in my web page, for instance, this I can alert them to listen to this. People started sending me. They would send me songs. They would send me videos. I mean, there was and I remember to this day, and we didn't know what to do because we were getting so many videos and so many songs to listen. It's only 3 guys, Orozman de la Guardia, David Bianco, and me. That's it. That was the company. So we didn't know what to do. So we get all this. What we do is say, let's put them by country and close our eyes and choose, and see what can we hear and listen to. So now the problem is what you do, how do you present it? How do you make people know it exists? I think that people that have a name already, like myself, I have like 1 million people in the Facebook, and with you it'll be like 1,100,000. and then I got and you know what? That's how they measure you today. They don't ask you how many movies you've done. They don't ask you who you work with. How many people you have on Facebook? How many Twitter
followers?
Twitter follows, yeah. So now, if I put that in there, maybe somebody will listen to it and then go, who is this person? No, yeah, but I'm saying that's the biggest problem. The best thing, though, is you can record whatever you want, and you can make it, you can release it yourself, and you're your own boss. So it's the best of times and the worst of times.
Just a last question about your experience with Michael Jackson. I'm talking about totally different.
Some people come over to me and ask, they think that that my life has been like sort of planned. And it's not irrational to think that. Right now I'm in a TV show that is seen in this country, depending, live +3, you get 7 million. The past season, the average was between 8 and 11 million. That's mind-boggling. My country has almost 4 million people, the whole country. So you go like on a weekend, you get 7 million people watch you. This is here. The show is being placed in 92 countries. So right now, some guy in Nepal is watching the show, and then they don't know, exactly who you are. But they see Salazar and they go, and then they go, who's this guy? And then he sings. Really? What does he sing? Let me see what he does. The connections are like incredible. What happens with all that information? So the Jackson scenario was that because I don't have a publicist, and that's why I said you may think, oh my God, this guy is. I don't have a manager. I never had a manager. That's almost incredible. I never had a manager. I don't have publicists. I don't have assistants. And that's why I'm late. Sometimes I forget. I thought this was tomorrow. You don't know. I got somebody called, a friend of mine from Venezuela said, oh yeah, today. I said, no, it's tomorrow. No, it's today. And I went like, Jesus Christ. So it's not like I have a plan that has led me to this.
Or even a Google Calendar, apparently.
No, I have the damn calendar in front of me. It's just that I don't, sometimes I don't pay attention. So the Jackson story is like, how many people here know? Well, you know who Michael Jackson was? Is, right? Okay. So did you know that he recorded 1 song in Spanish in his whole career?
Todos mis amores eres tú.
Claro. But do you know that? Did you know that? He recorded 1 song in Spanish. So how did that happen? I'm home in Los Angeles. I got a call from Quincy Jones. And he said, Ruben, it's Q. Hey, yeah, what's up? Mira, Michael wants to record in Spanish a song. And I said, okay. And he says, and I told him that you're the guy. You're the guy that's got to do this. And I said, yeah, Quincy, I just read somewhere that he wants to buy the bones of the Elephant Man And he said, don't pay attention to that nonsense. And I said, well, is this going to be like, is it going to be weird? He said, no, don't pay attention to that stuff. So I said, okay, so what am I supposed to do? He wants to do an adaptation of a song called I Just Can't Stop Loving You. And I said, okay. So take a listen, and we need a lyric in Spanish, and then you have to coach him. And I said, okay. So I listened to the song, and I thought, I liked it. I said, sure, I can do this. But then I called Quincy and said, I cannot do a translation of this song. I'm going to go very close to it. But, I need freedom in there, which means I'm going to be writing a version of it. So is that going to be cool? And he said, sure. So I wrote it. I wrote the whole thing in Spanish. I made special copies for him. And then I went to meet him to the studio. I was with him for 3 days. And I mean 3 complete days. And just like Quincy had promised, it was Michael, Humberto Gatica, who was the engineer of Thriller and Bad and all that. This was after Thriller. So Quincy and myself, that was it. So for 3 days, I had him with me. Let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, and he would do it. And I gotta tell you, that guy was a pleasure to work with and an inspiration, because he was a perfectionist. He would finish the thing and he would say, you think we can do it better? And I'd say, let's go. Let's go. And he would come and do it. And he would do it. And he would do it. And he would do it again. What do you think, Ruben? I said, it's great. You sure? Yeah, I think it. Let me try it again. And bah! He would do it again. And he would do it better. And he was relentless in this thing. And he did a wonderful job. And the song came out, and I was so proud of his pronunciation. Some years ago, decades ago, a great singer, Nat King Cole, one of the smoothest, silkiest voices ever.
Great pianist.
Oh, and a great pianist, yes, sir. That trio was something happening with him. Yeah, it's true. A lot of people don't remember that. Cole played piano, and he played. He did an album in Spanish, and that album in Spanish was a huge hit. And I remember when I was a kid listening to that, and in those days we had television didn't exist, so everything was radio. So we would just listen to radio all day. And we would look for songs that we liked in the radio to see, one station was playing the song we wanted to hear. And I remember, imagine how many times I must have heard this song to do it like this. Que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. But que sera, sera, la voz era Nat King Cole. So, and I always thought it was charming. We loved the fact that he was doing it that way. You could tell it was a person that didn't speak Spanish, but was singing in Spanish and sang it the way that the person felt. With Michael, I wanted for him to do cuando la. I wanted to hear each word and each R and each, and he did it. And he did it just perfectly. And it was so good, in fact, that when the song came out, the people at CBS Records were upset because they said that he had done it so well that people would not know it was him. I said, what are you talking about? Michael Jackson's voice is Michael Jackson's voice. What are you talking about? They won't know it's him.
They want that accent.
Yeah. Absolutely. They wanted it. And I said, and Michael didn't want it either, that to do it like that. So we did it, the thing. And finally, after the song came out and all, and again, I was with him for these 3 days. And I mean, the whole day, I don't have a picture with him. I didn't ask for pictures. I didn't ask for pictures with a lot of people because I always felt I was going to see them again. Or that we would, we'll see each other. So I have one picture with Dizzy Gillespie, thank God. I have one picture with him. And I remember the day we took it because it was some guy I didn't even know had a Polaroid. It was a big thing in those days, a Polaroid, an instant picture, whoa. And I saw this and I said, come on, let's take a picture. And we took a picture, that's this guy. Did you take a picture? And that's Dizzy, you know. Pop, took the picture and I have it. It's the only picture I have with him. Yeah. I have one picture with Miles that I know of. And that's because we were delivering some award somewhere. And so I know that somebody must have taken the picture. So I know the picture is around. I don't have it with me. But we have the video on YouTube is like, they have the Declaration of Independence. I mean, they got like everything in there. So, you know, so it was a pleasure to work with him. And then the last thing Michael did that was the sweetest thing ever. Michael was a very shrewd business person. He was smart. You know that story about McCartney and him doing the Ebony and Ivory? And McCartney saying, but really, the money is really at the publishing, you know. That's where the box are, and the publishing. And Michael went like, really? And went and bought the Beatle catalog. Oh! He went like, oh my God. So, you know, and then I got a call from the lawyer. He says, Michael is giving you, he gave me, I don't remember exactly the amount, but he gave me like 40% of the song. Which he never did for anybody. The guy, his lawyer was a gentleman by the name of Branca, I think, and he said, you know, never see him do that. I actually advised him against it.
So, that was my job, yeah.
Yeah, but I said, you know, I'm glad you lost. So Michael Jackson, I was saddened as I feel about Prince as well. I can't believe this happened. Nobody expected it. But again, you know, what can you say? But the fact that it was a privilege to work with him and to see how good he was really in his craft. And nobody knew about it because I didn't make a public statement about it. I didn't go out and made a big fuss about it. It just happened, and like any other thing. And I'm currently now thinking about writing a book about stories and anecdotes. Because the one thing I did learn is that, for instance, if people don't know this story about Bausa and the Chick Webb and Fitzgerald, they should know. My teacher of solfeo was Alberto Socarrás. Alberto Socarrás, Cuban musician. Arguably, the first jazz solo, flute solo ever recorded, Alberto Socarrás. And I didn't know, but Alberto Socarrás was also Wynton Marsalis's teacher. And I just found this out when I was working with Wynton and the show we did at the Rose Theater with the Lincoln Jazz Orchestra, where we did a whole night. We did half of the repertoire was Latin music, and the other half were Latin standards, jazz standards that I learned.
Like swings.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Incredible.
interesting because I was singing jazz standards because those were the albums that first got to my house. The first album my mother ever bought that brought to the house was an Ahmad Jamal album because my mom played piano. My mom played like Fats Waller. You know, she had that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's right. So, but we had, so my house, we were always listening to, I sang with Lou Donaldson in Panama in the 60s. He showed up there and played with Sonny Rollins and played with Sonny Stitt and, you know, a lot of the guys, you know. So it was wonderful to be able to have been a part of, you know, of that Dexter Gordon, Max Roach, all those guys. You know, to be able to, Tony Williams, God bless him, Jaco Pastorius, you know, all those guys, to have been able to be with them and have them tolerate me, you know, and have conversations with these people, you know, where basically I listen. That's what I do miss about the younger generation today. I would imagine the musicians are still there. I'm Jerry Mulligan, you know, I mean, some of the guys I really miss a lot because they were very, very funny. Joe Cuba was funny as hell. Tito Puente was funny as hell. Joe Cuban once did something to Tito Puente that was very funny. They were playing at the Carnegie Hall, and Joe took Tito's name from his dressing room door and put it on the door that took you to the hall to the outside, to the alleyway. They used to do a lot of things. You have to be really smart, with these guys. But I mean, so much to talk about.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
let's give a-
yeah.
Thank you. I know we had a lot of questions left, but maybe we can come back. But thank you so much for coming, and thank you.
Bob Marley? What about
Bob?
reggae? Using reggae?
I'll tell you about Marley's story very quickly. About Marley, remember Panama? Panama is calypso.
Yeah.
So we grew up listening to calypso, and we were listening to Mighty Sparrow, and then we had our own, Lord Kitchener, we had Lord Cobra, Lord Kontiki, the locals. I played ukulele. I learned to play ukulele and learned songs like Love in the Cemetery. It was dark, 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 in a big, big pond. I felt like a king up on the throne, me and me Melda Lime Dome. When I heard a talk and a creeping walk, and a voice said, "Mister, you brave, you bring in your girlfriend on top me grave. You talk about run, I nearly broke me head, living running from the dead. Ghost said, don't run me lad, come and play a game of cats. Well, now as I'm running in truth, me foot sticking a mango root. I fall down inside a tomb. I got out with a zoom, zoom, zoom." The scream I heard, I think the whole world shake. Well, now in big trouble. This time I saw a she-devil. I see a tall, wide house on top of a big black cross, and a voice yelled, and a voice said, "Mister," no, and a voice said something. I said, "Kids, come go to bed." Like the ghost is calling the kids to come to bed. And we were used to do all this stuff in calypso and stuff. My story with Marley is, it's a lady that has a restaurant in the neighborhood where I was born. I was born in Casco Viejo, in the area of Casco Viejo. And I moved there in 1992. I went back to the neighborhood. When it was filled with gangs and problems, I moved back into the neighborhood. One of the problems we've had with neighborhoods is that people that made good leave. They don't stay. We should stay. We should go back and try to change it by example, So I went back and moved back to the neighborhood in 1992. It was tough then. It's easier now. But a lady that came, a lady from Colón, came to Casco and opened a restaurant. And this is how I found this out. She's one day talking to me, and she said, I never knew about you. Never heard your music, and I never knew you existed. And I said, I didn't say it, how dare you? I just said nothing. I said, and she said, you know who taught me about your music? And I said, no. And she surprised me because she said, Bob Marley. Wow. And I said, Bob Marley? She said, yes. She was married with one of the people in Toots band. And then she was in Jamaica, and they were all together, and Marley asked her, well, she found out she's from Panama. So Marley said, so you know Blades, Rubén Blades. And she said, who? And he said, well, my God, you don't know who Rubén Blades is? You haven't heard his music? And she said, oh, and she said, we should listen to it. And then he said, that's how I learned about you. I said, oh my God. I never met him. I met Peter Tosh. Peter I did meet. I did hang with Peter. The thing with us with the reggae was, I actually recorded Desapariciones as a reggae. And the reason I did that was that because the song was talking about disappearances. I wanted the song to accomplish several things. One was to inform the people that were suffering the disappearances that we knew what was going on. That outside of their circle, we knew what was going on. Because one thing is that makes you feel terrible is you feel alone. You know, you feel totally alone and vulnerable. But when you feel that other people are also going through that are aware of what you're going through, then you don't feel that alone. That was one. The lyrics. The music, I went to a reggae because you couldn't really dance it. You had more to, if anything, you were going to just move, but you were not going to be dancing. I wanted people to not move too much. And because it's a reggae, I made it, the melody, if you notice, is circular. It's all circular. It doesn't go anywhere. I didn't want people to go anywhere. I wanted people to be You're not going anywhere. You're right there. Every time you turn, you see the thing. You turn this way, you see the thing. You got nowhere to go. So and reggae has that hypnotic thing that just sets a mood, you know. And when we did that, actually, because of that song, we had to, included a drummer in the band. We didn't have a drummer in the band. But I got somebody from the Exciters from Panama who was here. The drummer came and put, Horacio came in and put the drum. And then, there's nothing I could do. I now had to get a drummer. So instead of Seda Solar, we became Seda Solar plus one, really. And people are always asking, why are you called Seda Solar if you're 7? So I never was good at math. And actually, to last story, those of you, how many are you in school? Studying? Okay. I'm going to tell you a story. I flunked 3 subjects in school. In my second, we call it secundaria. It's from 1st to 3rd and from 4th to 6th. In here they continue, like 12, 13, 14. I flunked 3 subjects. One was mathematics. Basically, I didn't like the teacher. I flunked music. I didn't like the teacher. And I flunked artistic education. And I mean flunk. I had to do it again. Okay? I had to do a whole year for those 3 subjects.
And you like the teacher.
No, but what I'm saying is, you guys are in school. If you see me, you think everything was like no. I mean, I tell people I flunked music and they think I'm making it up. Yeah. No, I just flunked. I flunked it because I didn't like the teacher or I was bored. Mm-hmm. So remember that, because it's not about what you flunk, it's about how you survive. How do you atone for that and move forward? You know, and bless every time you fall. Bless every time you fall, because you're going to get up stronger. And you're going to learn. You don't learn from what's right. You learn from your mistakes. You know, and if there weren't any mistakes, there wouldn't be any successes. Okay? So, and another thing, finish your school. That was the most important thing I did. Finish your school now, before things become more complicated.
Thank you so much.
Gracias.